Hello, my dear English learners. Welcome back to English Practice with Julia. I'm Julia, and I'm truly so happy to have you here with me today. If this is your first time here, then let me warmly welcome you. Please feel relaxed and comfortable. You do not need perfect English to join this lesson. You only need a little time, a little patience, and the willingness to learn. And I'll be here to guide you gently, step by step, every single day. We share a new English learning lesson every day, so you can keep practicing in a calm, easy, and consistent way without pressure. Today, I want you to think of this lesson as a cozy English conversation, just you and me, learning together in a simple and peaceful way. There is no need to hurry, and there is no need to feel nervous. In this lesson, we are going to gently improve your listening, your speaking, and even your writing a little too. So if you can, please take a pen and some paper and keep them near you. It's not a rule, of course, but it can really help you remember new expressions more easily, and it can help you feel more confident as you practice. Now, today's topic is everyday English conversations for B1 to B2 level learners. And I think this is such an important topic because in real life, English is not only about grammar rules or difficult vocabulary. It is also about knowing how to speak naturally, how to respond clearly, and how to feel comfortable in daily conversations, at work, in shops, with friends, on the phone, while traveling, and in many other everyday situations. So in today's lesson, we're going to explore useful and natural English conversations that people really use every day. The kind of English that sounds real, warm, and fluent. Together, we'll go through clear examples, natural sentence patterns, and practical situations that can help you sound more confident in your own speaking. You'll also hear phrases and expressions that B1 and B2 learners should know because they can help you move from simple English to more natural and more flexible English. And don't worry, we are not going to rush. We'll take it slowly, clearly, and step by step so you can really notice how the sentences work, how ideas connect, and how native speakers often express themselves in everyday life. You will also get practice examples and speaking style exercises during the lesson. So this is not just about listening. It is also about helping you use English more actively, more naturally, and more confidently. By the end of this lesson, I want you to feel more comfortable with everyday English conversations. I want you to feel that you can understand more, respond more easily, and express yourself in a smoother and more natural way. Even if you make small mistakes, that is completely okay, because every sentence you practice is helping you grow stronger in English, little by little, day by day. Before we begin, may I ask you for one small and kind favor? If you enjoy learning English with me in this calm and friendly way, please subscribe and press the bell icon too. That way, you won't miss our daily lessons, and it also supports me so I can keep creating these gentle lessons for you. Thank you so much. Truly. I really appreciate it. Listen to this small example in your mind Imagine you walk into a workplace, a class, or even a cafe where you see someone you know. The other person smiles and says, "Morning, how are you doing today?" You could say, "I'm doing well, thanks. I didn't sleep enough, but I'm okay." Do you notice how natural that sounds? It is not a perfect, polished sentence from a grammar book. It sounds like real life. Here is another example. "Hey, good to see you. How have you been?" You could answer, "I've been good. Just busy with work lately." Or, "Pretty well, actually. I've been trying to stay organized this week." How that small extra detail makes your English sound more alive. A lot of learners worry because they think they must always say something impressive, but that is not true. In everyday conversations, simple and clear is often much better than complicated and unnatural. If a friend asks, "How's your day going?" you do not need to create a long speech. You can say, "It's going well so far. I've already finished a few things, so I feel good." Or, "It's been a bit stressful, honestly, but I'm managing." Or, "Pretty normal, really. Nothing too exciting." These are the kinds of responses people use every day, and they help you sound human, warm, and natural. Let's practice that feeling a little more. Imagine I ask you, "How's your week been?" You might answer, "It's been quite busy, but productive." That is a very useful B1 to B2 kind of answer. Short, clear, and natural. You could also say, "It's been a little tiring, to be honest. I've had a lot to do." Or, "It's been good. I finally had time to catch up on a few things." Try to notice something important here. Your answer becomes more interesting when you add a small reason or a little personal detail. Instead of saying only "good" or "busy," you explain why, and that helps the conversation move forward. Now let's move into a very common daily situation, talking to someone about routine things. This happens everywhere. At home, at work, at school, in the neighborhood, in a store, on the phone. And even while waiting in line. People often talk about ordinary activities because ordinary life is where most conversation happens. For example, someone might ask, "What have you been up to today?" This is a common question, and it does not mean you need to say something dramatic. You can answer, "Not much, really. I answered some emails, cleaned up a little, and then came here." Or, "I've mostly been working all day. I needed to finish something before the evening." Or, "I had a slow start this morning, but I'm getting things done now." That last answer is especially useful because it sounds relaxed and real. "I had a slow start this morning" is the kind of thing many people say in natural English. It paints a picture. It gives a feeling. And it helps you connect with the other person. In daily conversation, people often connect through these small truths. They say things like, "I'm still half asleep," or "I've been running around all day," or "I'm trying to stay on top of everything." These expressions are useful because they sound like real spoken English. Now imagine a conversation between two coworkers or classmates. One says, "You look a little tired today. Everything okay?" The other answers, "Yeah, everything's fine. I just stayed up too late last night." Then the first person says, "Oh no, were you working or just couldn't sleep?" And the second person replies, "A bit of both, actually. I had work to finish and then I couldn't relax." This conversation feels very natural because it moves gently. One person notices something. The other person explains. Then a follow-up question appears, and the conversation continues. This is exactly what you want to learn to do in English. Not only answer one question, but help the conversation breathe and grow. A very good skill at B1 to B2 level is learning how to react naturally when someone speaks to you. Many learners focus only on creating full sentences, but reactions are just as important. Reactions show that you are listening. They make you sound involved in the conversation. Think about expressions like, "Really? That makes sense. I know what you mean. Oh, that's nice. That sounds stressful. Good for you. No way. That happens to me too." These small reactions are everywhere in real English. Without them, a conversation can sound cold or flat. With them, your English sounds much more natural. Let's imagine this example. Your friend says, "I had to take 3 buses to get here today." You could react by saying, "Seriously, that sounds exhausting." Then your friend might continue, "Yeah, it took forever." And you could say, "I'd be tired too if that happened to me." Do you see how this works? You are not just hearing English. You are joining it. You are building connection. You are responding like a real person. That is a huge step toward fluency. Now let's talk about another everyday situation. Casual small talk with people you know a little. Maybe a neighbor, a classmate, a colleague, or someone you see often but do not know deeply. In these conversations, English is often friendly, light, and simple. Someone may say, "Beautiful weather today, isn't it?" You might answer, "Yeah, it's really nice out today. Much better than yesterday." Or someone might say, "Looks like you've had a busy day." You could answer, "I definitely have. I've barely had time to sit down." These kinds of replies are useful because they are natural and easy to remember. Sometimes learners think small talk is not important, but actually it is one of the most useful conversation skills in daily life. Small talk helps you begin. It helps you connect, and it can lead to deeper conversation later. For example, if someone says, "Did you do anything nice over the weekend?" You could say, "Nothing too special. I mostly rested, did some shopping, and spent time at home." That is already a solid answer. But you can make it even more natural by adding a feeling. "Nothing too special, honestly. I mostly stayed home, and it was actually nice because I needed the rest." That little emotional touch makes your English feel more human. Let's do a soft speaking exercise together. I will give you a question, and I want you to imagine your answer in English. How was your morning? A natural answer could be, "It was pretty calm. I got up early, had some coffee, and tried to plan my day. Here is another one. Have you been busy lately? A natural answer could be, yeah, a little. I've had a lot on my mind recently. Another one. What did you do after work yesterday? You could say, I went straight home, made dinner, and just relaxed for the rest of the evening. These are excellent everyday patterns. They are not too simple, and they are not too advanced. They are right in that useful middle space where B1 and B2 learners grow stronger. Now I want to show you how everyday conversations often use soft language instead of very direct language. This is something that makes spoken English sound smoother. Instead of saying, I am tired all the time, a person might say, I'm a little worn out, or I'm pretty tired today, or I'm feeling a bit low on energy. Instead of saying, I am busy, someone might say, I've got a lot going on, or it's been a full day, or I've been juggling quite a few things. These expressions add variety and make your English feel more flexible. Let's place these into conversation. Someone asks, how are things? You say, they're okay. I've got a lot going on at the moment, but I'm handling it. That sounds calm, mature, and natural. Or someone asks, are you tired? And you answer, a little. Yeah. It's been a long day. This is exactly how many people speak in daily life. They soften what they say. They add feeling, and they avoid sounding too mechanical. Another very important daily skill is learning how to continue a conversation when the other person gives a short answer. This happens all the time. Imagine you ask someone, how was your weekend? And they say, pretty good. If you do not know how to continue, the conversation can stop there. But if you ask a simple follow-up, you keep it alive. You can say, that's good. Did you do anything interesting? Or nice. Was it relaxing or busy? Or glad to hear that. What was the best part? These follow-up questions are powerful because they are simple, but they keep the flow going. Here is a natural example. How was your weekend? Pretty good, actually. That's nice. Did you get much rest? A little. Not as much as I wanted. Yeah, I know that feeling. Weekends go by so fast. That last sentence is especially useful. Weekends go by so fast. It is a simple comment, but it sounds very natural and relatable. These kinds of comments help conversation feel easy and comfortable. Now let's imagine a daily life conversation in a cafe or takeaway place. This is a very common situation for English learners. You walk in and the person at the counter says, "Hi there. What can I get for you?" You might answer, "Hi. Can I get a medium coffee and a chicken sandwich, please?" Then they ask, "Anything else?" And you say, "No, that's all for now. Thanks." Or maybe they ask, "For here or to go?" And you answer, "Chow to go, please." This kind of conversation may seem simple, but it becomes much more comfortable when you practice the rhythm of it. Now let's make it more natural and more B1 to B2 level. The worker says, "Hi, what can I get started for you?" And you answer, "Hi, I'll have a latte, please. And could I also get one of those chocolate muffins?" That sounds smoother and a little more flexible. Then, if something is unavailable, they might say, "Sorry, we're out of muffins today." And you can respond, "Oh, no problem. What else would you recommend?" That is a very useful line. What else would you recommend? It helps you continue the interaction naturally instead of feeling stuck. Here is another practice example. And imagine the worker says, "Would you like that hot or iced?" And you answer, "Iced, please, and not too sweet if possible." Then the worker says, "Sure thing." And you reply, "Thanks, I appreciate it." Do you hear how normal and polite that sounds? These little phrases matter. They are part of real everyday English, and using them well can make you sound much more confident. If someone asks, "How's work going?" you could answer in a very simple way and say, "It's going well, thanks." But at this level, it is useful to stretch your answer a little. You might say, "It's going well overall. I've been a bit busy, but things are under control." Or, "It's been a little hectic lately, but I'm learning a lot." Or, "Honestly, it's been a mixed week. Some parts have been smooth and some have been stressful." These answers sound more real because life is usually not only good or only bad. It is often somewhere in the middle, and that kind of balance makes your English sound more natural. Let's imagine a short conversation between two people after work. One person says, "You look relieved. Was today a hard day?" The other person answers, "Yeah, it was pretty full on. I had meetings all morning and deadlines in the afternoon." Then the first person says, "That sounds exhausting." And the second person replies, "It was, honestly. But at least I got everything done." This kind of conversation is useful because it shows how people often speak in layers. They give a short answer first, then a detail, then a feeling, and then sometimes a positive ending. That pattern is very common in real speech. You can use the same kind of pattern when talking about study. If someone asks, "How are your classes going?" you might say, "They're going pretty well. I'm trying to stay on top of everything." That phrase, "stay on top of everything," is very useful. It means you are trying to remain organized and in control. You could also say, "They're interesting, but I've had a lot of reading lately." Or, "I'm enjoying them more now. I think I'm finally getting used to the routine." These are great everyday phrases because they help you describe your real experience without sounding too formal. Another very common topic in daily conversation is home life. People often talk about home because it feels personal, safe, and familiar. Someone may ask, "How have things been at home?" Or, "Have you had a quiet evening?" Or, "Did you get much done at home this weekend?" These are excellent chances to practice natural English. You could say, "Things have been pretty calm at home recently. which has been nice. Or I spent most of the evening catching up on chores. Or I was hoping to relax, but I ended up cleaning for half the day. That last sentence is especially natural because it includes contrast. And contrast is everywhere in real conversation. We often say what we expected, and then what actually happened. For example, you can say, I meant to go out yesterday, but I ended up staying home. Or, I was planning to be productive, but I got distracted. Or, I thought I'd have more free time, but the day disappeared so quickly. These are wonderful sentence patterns for B1 to B2 learners because they help your English sound thoughtful and flexible. They also help you tell small stories, and small stories are one of the best ways to keep a conversation alive. Now let's practice a very natural daily life conversation about home routines. Imagine one friend says, "What did you get up to last night?" The other answers, "Not much, really. I made dinner, watched something for a while, and then went to bed earlier than usual." Then the first person says, "That actually sounds nice." And the other replies, "Yeah, I needed a quiet evening." This is such a realistic exchange. It is not dramatic. It is not complicated, but it sounds warm and human. And that is exactly what everyday English often sounds like. One thing that helps a lot in daily conversation is learning how to talk about plans. Not only fixed plans, but also possible plans, loose plans, and half plans. In real life, people often say things like, "I might go out later." "I'm thinking of meeting a friend." "I haven't decided yet." "I'll see how I feel." Or, "I'm hoping to get a few things done this afternoon." These expressions are extremely useful because real life is full of uncertainty. We are often not 100% sure what we will do. So instead of always speaking in very direct future sentences, English speakers often use softer and more flexible expressions. For example, if someone asks, "Any plans for this weekend?" you could say, "Nothing fixed yet, but I might go see some friends." Or, "I'm hoping to take it easy this weekend. I've had a busy week." Or, "I've got a few errands to run, but other than that, I just want to rest." These answers sound balanced and natural. They also make it easier for the other person to continue the conversation. They may ask, "Oh, where are you thinking of going?" Or, "What kind of errands do you need to do?" Or, "That sounds nice. Do you usually rest on weekends?" And then the conversation keeps moving. Let's stay with this theme and practice a conversation about making plans with someone. Imagine one person says, "Do you want to grab coffee sometime this week?" The other person replies, "Yeah, that would be nice. I'm a bit busy until Thursday, though." Then the first person says, "Thursday could work. What time suits you?" The other replies, "Probably sometime after 5. I should be free by then." This is a very natural planning conversation. Notice that nobody is speaking in long, complicated grammar. But the conversation feels smooth because each sentence is clear and connected. Now imagine the person cannot meet. Instead of saying only no, They might say, "I'd love to, but this week is a bit difficult for me." Or, "This week's a little packed. Could we do it next week instead?" Or, "I'm not sure I can this week. Things are a bit hectic at the moment." These are useful because they sound polite and considerate. In real life, being natural in English is not only about vocabulary, it is also about tone, and polite tone matters a lot. This brings us to another important daily skill: asking for help, asking for clarification, or asking someone to repeat something. Many learners feel nervous in these moments, but actually, these are some of the most valuable phrases you can learn because they help you survive and communicate even when you do not understand everything. You can say, "Sorry, could you say that again? I didn't quite catch that. Do you mean this week or next week? Could you explain that a little more?" Or, "I'm not sure I understood what you meant." These phrases are natural, polite, and extremely useful in everyday life. Let's imagine a simple real-life example. Someone says, "The meeting's been moved forward, so we'll need that by Friday." And you are not sure what move forward means in that moment. You can say, "Sorry, just to be clear, do you mean the meeting is earlier now?" That is such a powerful sentence. Just to be clear is a very useful phrase because it sounds calm and professional, not confused. It shows that you are checking information carefully. You could also say, "Okay, got it. So you need it by Friday, right?" Repeating the idea back in your own words is a smart communication skill, and it helps avoid mistakes. Asking for help in everyday situations can also be very simple and natural. Imagine you are in a store and cannot find something. You can say, "Excuse me, do you know where I can find the batteries?" Or, "Hi, could you tell me where the notebooks are?" Or, "Sorry, is there someone who can help me with this?" These are clear, polite sentences, and they sound much better than saying only one or two disconnected words. At B1 to B2 level, you want to become more comfortable building these full but natural requests. Now imagine you are at work or in class and you need help from someone. You might say, "Do you have a minute? I just wanted to ask you about something." That is a wonderful opening line. Very natural, very polite, very useful. Or you could say, "Could you help me with this when you have a moment?" Or, "I was wondering if you could explain this part to me." The phrase, "I was wondering if you could," is especially good because it sounds soft and respectful. And English speakers use it all the time. Let's look at another area of daily conversation: you sharing opinions in a natural way. In real life, we do not always say strong things like "this is amazing" or "this is terrible." Very often we speak more softly. We say, "I think it was pretty good. I'm not really into that kind of thing. It wasn't bad, actually. I'm not sure how I feel about it." Or, "To be honest, I expected more." These kinds of phrases make you sound much more natural because they reflect how people really talk. Most daily opinions are not extreme. They are moderate, thoughtful, and flexible. Imagine someone asks, "What did you think of the movie?" You could say, "It was pretty good overall. Maybe a little long, but I enjoyed it." Or, "It wasn't really my kind of movie, but it had some good moments." Or, "I liked it more than I expected." These answers are excellent because they sound real. They show opinion, but they also show balance. And that is a big part of sounding natural at B1 to B2 level. This is also useful when talking about food, places, routines, and experiences. Someone may ask, "How was the restaurant?" And you can answer, "It was nice. The food was good and the atmosphere was really relaxed." Or, "It was okay. Not bad, but probably not somewhere I'd go all the time." Or, "I actually liked it a lot. I'd definitely go back." These are simple, clear, daily life opinions that fit perfectly into natural conversation. Now let's practice the skill of keeping conversation flowing by adding questions back to the other person. This is a very important habit because a conversation should not feel like an interview where only one person answers. It should feel shared. So after you answer, you can return the conversation with something like, "How about you? What about your weekend? Have you ever been there? Do you usually do that?" Or, "What do you think?" These short return questions are powerful. They make you sound engaged and confident. For example, if someone asks, "Have you been busy lately?" You might say, "Yeah, a little. I've had quite a lot going on this week. How about you?" Or if someone says, "I finally cleaned my whole apartment yesterday," you could respond, "That must feel good. Do you usually do a big clean on weekends?" That is a natural and friendly follow-up, and it shows real interest, which is one of the keys to good conversation in any language. Now let's move into a phone conversation example, because phone English can feel harder when you cannot see the other person's face. Imagine you call someone and they answer, "Hi, this is Emma." You say, "Hi, Emma, it's Julia. Do you have a minute?" She replies, "Yeah, sure. What's up?" And you say, "I just wanted to check whether we're still meeting tomorrow." She answers, "Yes, we are. Probably around 2, unless something changes." And you reply, "Perfect. I just wanted to make sure." This is such a useful kind of exchange. It is simple, natural, and full of phrases that come up again and again. Do you have a minute? What's up? I just wanted to check. I just wanted to make sure. These are the kinds of expressions that make your English feel truly usable. Sometimes on the phone, you may need to manage small problems. Maybe you did not hear clearly. Maybe the line was bad. Maybe the information changed. In those moments, you can say, "Sorry, the line's a bit bad. Could you repeat that?" Or, "I think we got cut off for a second." Or, "Let me just check I understood correctly." These phrases are very practical and very real. And when you know them, you feel less helpless in conversation. Imagine a friend asks, "How did you feel after the meeting?" You might say, Honestly, I felt much better afterwards. I was worried before, but it went more smoothly than I expected. That is a beautiful everyday pattern. First, you describe the feeling, then you explain why. Then you add contrast. I was worried before, but this kind of sentence structure makes your English sound much more natural and much more adult. It shows that you can do more than answer with one word. You can guide the listener through your thoughts. Let's stay with this idea and practice a few more natural responses. If someone says, "You seem happy today. What happened?" You could answer, "Nothing huge, really. I just had a good start to the day, and that always helps." Or, "I finally finished something I'd been putting off, so I feel a lot lighter now." That phrase, "I feel a lot lighter now," is very expressive and natural. It does not mean lighter in body weight. It means emotionally more relaxed, less heavy inside. English is full of these soft emotional expressions, and learning them will help you sound more real in conversation. Now imagine somebody asks, "You okay? You seem a little quiet." You could say, "Yeah, I'm okay. I'm just a bit tired today." Or, "I'm fine, honestly. I've just got a lot on my mind." Or, "I think I just need a little time to wake up properly." These answers are useful because they are simple, gentle, and believable. They do not sound dramatic. They sound human. And that is exactly the kind of tone that works well in everyday English. Another very common daily conversation topic is talking about problems in a calm and natural way. Not big dramatic problems all the time, but the small frustrations of everyday life. Maybe your bus was late. Maybe your phone battery died. Maybe you forgot something important. Maybe you had a long day and nothing seemed to go smoothly. These are all normal conversation topics because people connect through shared experiences. And daily inconveniences are a very common part of real conversation. For example, someone might say, "Rough day." And you could answer, "A little, yeah. Everything just felt slower than usual today." Or, "Yeah, kind of. Oh, nothing terrible happened, but a lot of small things went wrong." That second answer is especially natural. Nothing terrible happened, but a lot of small things went wrong. It sounds very real. It is balanced. And it is something many people can relate to. Let's imagine a short daily life exchange. One person says, "You look a bit stressed. Everything all right?" The other replies, "Yeah, I'll be okay. It's just been one of those days." That phrase, "It's been one of those days," is extremely useful. It means the day has been difficult, annoying, or unlucky in a general way, without needing to explain every detail. Then the first person might say, "I know exactly what you mean." And the second person replies, "Hopefully, tomorrow will be better." This is the kind of natural emotional conversation that happens all the time in English. Now let's move into another important daily topic, talking about preferences, likes, dislikes, and habits. This comes up constantly in conversations with friends, coworkers, classmates, and even people you have just met. People ask things like, what kind of food do you like? Do you prefer mornings or evenings? Are you into cooking? Do you usually stay home on weekends? Or what do you normally do to relax? These questions may sound simple, but they are wonderful opportunities to make your English sound more natural and more personal. If someone asks, what do you usually do to relax? You could answer, I usually try to do something quiet. Maybe listen to music, go for a walk, or just take a break from my phone for a while. That answer sounds natural because it includes examples. Another option would be, it depends on my mood, honestly. Sometimes I want to be around people, and sometimes I just need peace and quiet. That is a very B1 to B2 style answer. It is flexible, thoughtful, and realistic. Now imagine someone asks, are you into cooking? You could say, a little. I'm not amazing at it, but I do enjoy making simple meals. Or, not really, to be honest. I can cook if I need to, but I wouldn't say I enjoy it. Or, yeah, actually, I find it relaxing when I have enough time. These answers are much better than only saying yes or no, because they give the other person something to respond to. They open the door to the next part of the conversation. This is something I really want you to remember. In everyday English, a good answer often gives the other person a place to continue. If you only say yes, the conversation may stop. But if you say, yeah, actually, I find it relaxing when I have enough time, the other person can ask, what do you like to cook? Or when did you start enjoying it? And the conversation moves forward naturally. Let's practice a little with everyday habit questions. If someone asks, are you usually an early riser? You might say, I try to be, but I'm not naturally a morning person. That sounds very natural. Or you could say, it depends on the week. When I have a lot to do, I usually get up early. Another example, do you like busy places? You might answer, not too much. I can enjoy them for a while, but I get tired of the noise pretty quickly. That is a lovely natural sentence. It shows a preference, but also a limit. And that kind of detail makes your English feel more fluent. Now let's talk about conversations where people share news or updates. This happens all the time. Someone may say, I finally finished that project. I'm moving next month. I got the job. My sister is visiting this weekend. Or I've started learning something new. When someone shares news, your response matters a lot because conversation is not only about speaking about yourself. It is also about reacting warmly and appropriately to other people's experiences. If a friend says, I finally got a day off, you could respond, that's great. You really needed that. Or, good for you. I know you've been busy lately. Or, that must feel amazing. These are all natural responses. If someone says, I'm moving next month, you could say, wow, that's a big change. Or, how are you feeling about it? Or, that's exciting. Are you looking forward to it? Notice how useful these reactions are. They help you show interest, emotion, and connection, all without using difficult language. Let's imagine a longer exchange. One person says, "I finally finished that report I'd been working on all week." The other replies, "That must be a relief." Then the first person says, "It really is. I feel like I can finally relax a bit." The second person responds, "You should definitely take a break tonight. You've earned it." This is such a natural kind of conversation, warm, supportive, and realistic. And if you can speak like this, your English will already feel much more alive. Sometimes, though, the news is not especially positive, and then you need calm, kind responses. For example, someone may say, "I didn't get enough sleep last night." You might say, "Oh no, that's the worst," or "That's rough. Hopefully you can rest later." If someone says, "My day didn't go as planned," you could answer, "That's frustrating," or "Yeah, that can really throw everything off," or "I hope tomorrow goes more smoothly for you." These responses are very helpful because they are gentle and human. They show that you understand emotional tone, and that is a big part of fluent conversation. Now let's move into an area that helps a lot with B1 to B2 speaking, telling short personal stories in a natural way. You do not need to tell long, complicated stories all the time, but being able to share a small experience clearly is very valuable. People often say things like, "You won't believe what happened earlier." "Something funny happened on my way here." "I had the strangest conversation yesterday." Or, "I almost forgot something really important this morning." These are natural ways to begin a little story in conversation. For example, you could say, "I almost left the house without my phone this morning. I only realized when I was about to lock the door." That sounds natural and easy to follow. Or you might say, "I was so distracted earlier that I made coffee and then completely forgot to drink it." That is a small story, but it is very relatable. And those are often the best kinds of stories in daily conversation. Small things that other people can imagine and connect with. Let's build that into a conversation. One person says, "You look like you're finally awake now." The other replies, "Yeah, I had such a slow start this morning." Then the first person asks, "Really? What happened?" And the other says, "I was half asleep. I made breakfast, forgot where I put my keys, and nearly left without my bag." That sounds so real. It sounds like something someone would actually say. And that is the kind of English you want to practice. Not only correct English, but believable English. A very helpful skill here is using time words and linking phrases naturally. Words like earlier, after that, in the end, at first, for a while, by the time, and eventually. These words help your story flow. For example, "At first, I thought it would be a quick errand, but in the end, I was out for almost 2 hours." Or, "I wasn't planning to stay long, but I ended up chatting with a friend for a while." These patterns are simple enough to use, but strong enough to make your English sound much smoother. Now I want to give you a soft practice exercise. Imagine someone asks you, "How was your day?" Instead of answering only good or fine, try building a more natural response like this. "It was actually pretty productive. I got a few important things done, and I feel better now that they're out of the way." Or maybe your answer is, "It was a bit tiring, to be honest, but not in a bad way. I just had a lot going on." Or perhaps, "It started slowly, but it got better as the day went on." These are excellent daily life answers. They are balanced, clear, and realistic. Here is another one. Imagine someone asks, "Did you do anything nice this week?" A natural answer could be, "Yeah, actually, I met up with a friend I hadn't seen in a while, and that was really nice." Or, "Nothing major, but I had a quiet evening to myself, and I really needed that." That phrase, "nothing major, but," is very useful because a lot of everyday conversation is not about dramatic events. It is about small moments and how they felt. A lot of people worry too much about first conversations, but the truth is that most of them are built from very normal questions. How do you know everyone here? What do you do? Have you been here long? What brings you here? Or, so, how's your week been? If someone asks, "What do you do?" you do not need to give a formal speech. You can say, "I work in an office," or "I'm studying at the moment," or "I do a bit of freelance work from home." Then, if you want to keep the conversation warm, you can add a small detail. "It keeps me pretty busy, but I enjoy it." Or, "I'm still figuring out what I want to do long term." Or, "It's interesting, though every day is a little different." Those kinds of answers sound much more human. Now imagine you are in a casual social setting, maybe a small gathering, a class, a workplace event, or even just waiting somewhere with another person. Someone says, "So, have you been busy lately?" And you answer, "A little, yeah. It's been one of those weeks where everything seems to happen at once." That sounds very natural. Then the other person might laugh and say, "I know exactly what you mean." And now the conversation feels shared. That is one of the biggest secrets of everyday conversation. It is not about saying impressive things. It is about saying relatable things, things the other person can connect with. Relatable language is powerful. Phrases like, "It's been a long week," "I've had a lot on my plate," "I'm just trying to keep up," "Things have been a bit all over the place," or "I've been taking things one day at a time," all sound natural because people really say them. And they express everyday life in a calm, believable way. These are especially useful at B1 to B2 level because they help you go beyond simple vocabulary like busy or tired and say something more fluent without making it complicated. Let's talk about invitations now, because invitations are everywhere in daily life. Someone invites you to coffee, lunch, a walk, a meeting, a party, or a simple plan for later. And you need to know how to respond naturally. If someone says, "Do you want to join us for lunch?" you can say, "Yeah, that sounds nice." Or, "Sure, I'd love to." Or, "That would be great. Thanks." These are all simple and natural. If you want to sound a little warmer, you can say, "Yeah, I'd love to. I could do with a break." Or, "Sure, that sounds really nice. What time are you thinking?" The extra detail makes the response feel more alive. Sometimes, of course, you cannot accept. And that is where polite English becomes very important. You do not want to sound rude or cold. In natural English, people often soften a refusal. They say things like, "I'd love to, but I've already got plans." "That sounds great, but I don't think I can make it." "I wish I could, but this week's a bit difficult for me." Or, "Maybe another time." "I've got a lot on this weekend." These expressions are excellent because they are honest, but also gentle. And tone matters so much in everyday conversation. Here is a very common example. Someone says, "A few of us are going out after work. Do you want to come?" You might answer, "Thanks for asking. I'd love to, but I'm pretty tired today." Or, "That's kind of you, but I need to head home tonight." Or, "I can't today, unfortunately, but let me know next time." That last phrase, "but let me know next time," is especially useful because it keeps the relationship warm, even when you are saying no. Now let's imagine the opposite situation. You are the one making the invitation. This is another very useful daily life skill. You can say, "Do you want to grab coffee sometime?" "Mao, are you free later? Would you like to come with us? We're thinking of going out for dinner. You're welcome to join." Or, "If you're around this weekend, we could meet up." These invitations sound natural because they are friendly without sounding too formal. At B1 to B2 level, it is good to get used to using flexible language like "sometime." If you're around, "we're thinking of," or "you're welcome to join," because real plans are often a little loose at first. Another important social skill is agreeing in a natural way. Not only saying yes, but showing support, interest, or shared opinion. In daily conversation, people often say, "Exactly. That's true. I know what you mean. That makes sense. I was just thinking the same thing." Or, "Yeah, I totally agree." These reactions are so common, and they make conversations feel smooth and connected. If someone says, "It's hard to find time to rest during the week," you could say, "It really is. By the time the evening comes, I'm already tired." That sounds much more natural than only saying yes, because you are agreeing and adding something. Adding something after agreement is a very strong conversational habit. For example, if someone says, "This month has gone by really fast," you can respond, "It really has. I can't believe we're already this far into it." Or if they say, "I think people underestimate how tiring daily life can be," you might answer, Absolutely. Even small things can take up so much energy. These are wonderful patterns because they help the conversation grow instead of stopping after one reaction. Now let's talk about polite disagreement, because in real life, you will not always feel the same way as the other person. But in English, especially in friendly or casual settings, people often disagree softly. They usually do not jump in with very direct expressions like, "You're wrong." Instead, they say, "I see what you mean, but maybe, though I'm not totally sure. That's fair, but I think I get why you'd say that, but from my experience," or "I'm not sure I agree completely." These phrases are extremely useful because they let you express a different opinion without sounding aggressive. Imagine someone says, "Working from home is always easier." You could respond, "I can see why people feel that way, but I think it depends on the person." That is a beautiful B1 to B2 response. It is calm, clear, and balanced. Or someone says, "Big cities are always more exciting than small towns." You might say, "That may be true in some ways, but I think smaller places can feel more peaceful." This kind of disagreement sounds thoughtful, and it is very natural in real conversation. Let's move into apologies now, because apologizing is one of the most human parts of language. And there are many small, everyday moments where you need it. You arrive late. You interrupt someone. You forget something. You misunderstand a message. You step in front of someone by accident. Or you cannot reply as quickly as you wanted. English has many useful apology patterns for these situations. "Sorry, I'm running a bit late." "I'm so sorry. I completely forgot." "Sorry to interrupt." Apologies, I misunderstood what you meant. "Sorry for the delay in getting back to you." Or, "My fault. I should have checked earlier." These all sound natural in different situations. A very good everyday phrase is "sorry about that," because it is light, flexible, and common. If you accidentally speak over someone, you can say, "Oh, sorry about that. Go ahead." If you send the wrong information, you can say, "Sorry about that. I sent the wrong one." If you are late, you might say, "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was worse than I expected." These short apologies are natural because they are clear and not too heavy. Let's imagine a real-life situation. You arrive late to meet a friend. You say, "I'm so sorry I'm late. I thought I'd be here on time, but everything took longer than I expected." Your friend replies, "Don't worry about it. I only got here a few minutes ago anyway." And you answer, "That makes me feel better. Thanks for being patient." This is such a natural exchange. Notice that the apology is sincere, but it is not overdone. And the response is reassuring. This is the kind of tone that works very well in English. Another social skill that matters a lot is knowing how to join a conversation already happening between other people. This can feel difficult because you may worry about interrupting, but there are very natural ways to do it. You can say, "Sorry, can I jump in for a second?" That reminds me of something. I was just going to say the same thing. That's interesting. Can I ask something? Or, I hope you don't mind me asking, but what happened in the end? These phrases help you enter the conversation smoothly, without sounding abrupt. In group conversations, it is also useful to show that you are listening even when you are not speaking much. Small reactions like, right, exactly, that's true, really, no way, that's funny, that sounds lovely, or that must have been difficult, all help you stay involved, and they also make the speaker feel heard. This is very important because good conversation is not only about saying a lot, it is also about reacting at the right moments. Now let's look at awkward moments, because these happen in every language. There may be a silence. You may forget a word. You may not understand something. Or you may not know how to continue. The good news is that Natural English already has phrases to help with these moments. If you need a second to think, you can say, "Let me think. How do I put this? What I mean is," or "I'm not sure how to explain it, but..." These phrases buy you a little time and help you keep speaking. For example, if someone asks, "Why did you enjoy that place so much?" and you need a moment, you can say, "Let me think. I think it was just the atmosphere more than anything." That sounds completely natural. Or if you cannot remember the exact word, you might say, "I can't remember the word for it, but it's the thing you use to..." That is much better than becoming silent or giving up. In real conversation, and people often explain around missing words. And that is a very real fluency skill. There are also useful phrases for handling small misunderstandings. If you misunderstood something, you can say, "Oh, I see. I thought you meant something else." Or, "Right, now I get what you mean." Or, "Sorry, I took that the wrong way." These phrases are helpful because misunderstandings are normal, even for native speakers. The goal is not to avoid them forever. The goal is to handle them calmly. Let's imagine a social exchange where this happens. One person says, "We should do this again sometime." And the other replies, "Yeah, definitely. I thought you meant next week for a second, but I see what you mean now." That small correction is natural, light, and easy. It does not create stress because the speaker handles it smoothly. This is what confident conversation often looks like. Not perfect conversation, but flexible conversation. Compliments are another lovely part of everyday English, and they appear more often than many learners expect. People compliment clothes, energy, cooking, ideas, effort, and even simple choices. If someone says, "I like your jacket," you can answer, "Thanks, I just got it recently." Or, "Thanks, that's really kind." If someone says, "You explained that really well," you could say, "Thanks. I'm glad it made sense." The key here is to accept the compliment warmly. You do not need to reject it or feel uncomfortable. A simple Thanks with a little extra detail is often enough. You can also give compliments naturally. That color really suits you. You've done a great job with this. That sounds delicious. You always explain things so clearly. Or you seem really calm under pressure. These are kind, useful phrases that make social conversation feel warmer. And warmth is such an important part of natural speaking. Before we finish this section, let's practice a longer social conversation in a very natural style. Imagine you arrive at a small gathering. Someone says, "Hey, glad you made it." You answer, "Yeah, me too. I almost didn't actually. It's been a bit of a busy day." The other person says, "I know the feeling. This week's been full on." And you reply, "Seriously, I feel like I've been rushing from one thing to the next." Then they ask, "Do you want something to drink?" And you say, "Sure, that would be great. Thanks." After a few minutes, they ask, "So, how do you know everyone here?" And you answer, "Mostly through work, actually. I've known Sam for a while, and I met a few others through him." This conversation feels easy because every sentence sounds normal, calm, and connected. And that is exactly the kind of English you want to build inside yourself. Let's begin with shopping conversations, because shopping is full of natural, repeated English patterns. Whether you are in a supermarket, a clothing store, a pharmacy, a small local shop, or even ordering something at a counter, the language often follows simple rhythms. But the key is learning how people really say these things. For example, instead of only saying, "Where is this?" you might say, "Excuse me, do you know where I can find the coffee?" Or, "Hi, could you tell me where the shampoo is?" Or, "Sorry, is there someone who can help me with this?" These are much more natural because they sound polite, complete, and easy to understand. Imagine you are in a store and you cannot find your size in a jacket. A very useful sentence would be, "Excuse me, do you have this in a larger size?" Or, "Hi, I was wondering if this comes in another color." That phrase, "I was wondering if," is one of the most useful, polite patterns in everyday English. It sounds softer than a direct demand, and native speakers use it all the time. You could also say, "Do you happen to have this in black?" The phrase, "Do you happen to," sounds friendly and natural, especially when you are asking for help. Now imagine the shop assistant answers, "Let me check for you." You can simply say, "Thanks, I appreciate it." If they come back and say, "Sorry, we don't have that one in your size," you might respond, "No problem. Thanks for checking." Or, "That's okay. I thought I'd ask." These little responses matter. Because natural conversation is not only about getting what you want, it is also about handling the answer politely, even when the answer is no. Let's build a longer practical conversation. You walk into a store and say, "Hi, I'm looking for a birthday card." The worker replies, "Sure. They're just over there near the front." And you say, "Great. thank you. Then later you come back and ask, sorry, could you help me with something else? They say, of course. And you ask, I'm trying to find wrapping paper. Is it in the same section? That sounds very natural. It is calm, clear, and polite. And these are exactly the kinds of small exchanges that happen constantly in real life. So another everyday shopping skill is describing what you need when you do not know the exact word. This is a very important fluency skill because in real conversation, you will not always remember every vocabulary item, and that is okay. What matters is being able to explain around the word. For example, if you do not remember the word charger, you might say, I'm looking for the thing you use to charge your phone. That is completely natural. People do this in every language. Or you might say, do you have the kind of bag people use for gym clothes? Even if your sentence is not perfect, you are still communicating clearly. And that is what matters most. Now let's turn to transport. Because transport conversations are another big part of daily English. This includes buses, trains, taxis, ride apps, and asking for directions when you are unsure where to go. Many learners worry about these situations because they often happen quickly. But the good news is that the language is usually very practical and repetitive. Once you know the common patterns, you can handle a lot of these conversations with much more ease. For example, if you are unsure about a bus or train, you might ask, excuse me, does this bus go to the city center? Or, hi, is this the right train for Oak Street Station? Or, sorry, do you know if this stops near the hospital? These are all very natural ways to ask for travel information. If the other person answers quickly and you are not sure you understood, you can say, sorry, did you say the next stop or the one after that? Or, okay, just to make sure, I need to get off at Central Station, right? Again, this habit of checking information is so useful. It helps you sound calm and careful rather than confused. Let's imagine a small travel conversation. You ask, excuse me, how long does it usually take to get there from here? The other person says, usually about 20 minutes, depending on traffic. And you reply, that's helpful. Thanks. I wasn't sure how far it was. That sounds very natural. Or perhaps you are in a taxi or car service and say, hi, I'm going to 84 Pine Avenue, please. Then, after a few minutes, you ask, would it be possible to stop near the corner? Or, could you drop me off just outside the main entrance? These are very useful practical phrases. And when you know them, everyday life feels much more manageable in English. Directions are another essential area. And natural English directions often sound more conversational than textbook directions. Someone may say, go straight for a bit, then take the second left. Or, it's not far. Just keep going until you see the bank. Or, you can't miss it. It's right next to the post office. These expressions come up all the time, and especially phrases like for a bit, not far, and you can't miss it. If you are the one asking, you can say, "Sorry, could you tell me how to get to the station from here?" Or, "Excuse me, am I heading in the right direction for Maple Street?" Or, "Do you know if there's a pharmacy nearby?" These sound natural, useful, and polite. Now imagine someone gives you directions and you want to repeat them back to be sure. You might say, "Okay, so I go straight ahead, then turn left at the traffic lights." That is an excellent communication strategy. Or you could say, "Right, I think I've got it. Thanks so much." That sounds calm and appreciative. Everyday fluency often grows from these small moments of checking, repeating, and confirming. Now let's move into appointments and scheduling, because this is something adults do all the time. Medical appointments, work meetings, repair visits, haircuts, deliveries, interviews, and many other daily arrangements. If you can manage these conversations in English, you will feel much more independent. For example, if you need to arrange something, you might say, "Hi, I'd like to book an appointment for Friday if possible." Or, "I'm calling to see if there's anything available this afternoon." Or, "Would it be possible to move my appointment to next week?" These are all extremely useful sentences, and they sound more natural than very short, broken requests. Imagine this conversation on the phone. "Hello, I'm calling to book a dentist appointment." "Sure. What day were you hoping for?" "If possible, sometime early next week. We have Tuesday at 10 or Wednesday at 3. "Wednesday at 3 would work well for me." This is such a common pattern. And once you practice these simple exchanges, they become much less stressful. Sometimes, of course, plans change. And then you need practical English for cancellation or delay. You might say, "I'm sorry, but I need to cancel my appointment for tomorrow." Or, "Would it be possible to reschedule?" Or, "Something has come up and I won't be able to make it." That phrase, "something has come up," is extremely useful. Because people say it all the time when an unexpected problem appears. It sounds natural, and it does not require you to explain every detail. Let's imagine another real-life example. You are running late and need to call someone. You say, "Hi, I just wanted to let you know I'm running about 15 minutes late." That is a wonderful everyday sentence. Very natural, very useful. The other person might say, "No problem. Thanks for letting me know." And you could reply, "I appreciate your understanding. I'll be there as soon as I can." These are exactly the kinds of phrases that make your English sound mature and reliable. Now let's talk about asking for information in public places, because this comes up in offices, banks, reception desks, clinics, libraries, front counters, and many other daily settings. In these moments, clear and polite English is very important. You might say, "Hi, I just wanted to ask where I need to go for my appointment." Or, "Excuse me, could you tell me which floor the office is on?" Or, I'm here to pick something up. Could you point me in the right direction? These phrases sound polite, practical, and calm. Sometimes you also need to explain a small issue. Maybe there is a mistake. Maybe you did not receive something. Maybe something was delayed. Maybe the information is different from what you expected. In these cases, soft but clear language is best. For example, you might say, "Hi, I think there may be a small mistake here." Or, "Sorry, I was told it would be ready today, so I just wanted to check." Or, "I ordered this earlier, but I think I may have received the wrong one." Notice how these sentences do not sound aggressive. They sound respectful, but they are still clear. That balance is very important in everyday English. Let's imagine a practical conversation at a reception desk. You say, "Hi, I'm here for a 3 o'clock appointment with Ms. Carter." The receptionist replies, "Of course. Could I have your name, please?" You answer, "Yes, it's Julia Harris." Then they say, "Thank you. Please have a seat. Someone will call you shortly." And you reply, "Perfect. Thanks very much." This is a very simple interaction, but it is exactly the kind of English that helps you feel comfortable in real life. Now imagine something has gone wrong. You arrive and they cannot find your booking. You might say, "That's strange. I booked it earlier this week." Or, "I have the confirmation on my phone if that helps." Or, "Would you like me to show you the message I received?" These are excellent everyday sentences because they help solve the problem without creating unnecessary tension. Real fluency often means staying calm when things are a little unclear and using language that helps the situation move forward. Let's spend a moment on deliveries and service situations. Ciao, because these are another very common part of life. Maybe you are waiting for a package, calling about internet service, speaking to a repair worker, or checking on something that should have arrived. You can say, "Hi, I'm calling about a delivery that hasn't arrived yet." Or, "I just wanted to check the status of my order." Or, "It was supposed to arrive this morning, but I haven't received anything yet." These are natural and useful ways to explain the issue. If the other person gives you an update, you may want to ask follow-up questions like, "Do you know roughly when it might arrive? Will I get a message when it's on the way?" Or, "Is there anything I need to do on my side?" These are practical, clear questions, and they help you stay active in the conversation instead of only waiting for information. Now let's talk about one of the most helpful practical skills of all: dealing with confusion without panic. This is such an important part of real conversation because confusion happens to everyone. You may hear something unclearly, misunderstand an instruction, miss part of a message, or feel unsure about what the other person meant. That is normal. What matters is knowing what to say next. Instead of freezing, you can say, "Sorry, I'm not quite following." Or, "Could you go over that one more time?" Or, I just want to make sure I understand correctly. Or, do you mean today? Or later this week? These phrases help you stay in control of the conversation, even when you are unsure. Let's imagine you are being given instructions and you miss one step. You could say, "Sorry, I understood the first part, but I missed what you said after that." That is such a useful sentence. It shows that you were listening, and it tells the other person exactly where the problem is. Or maybe you want to slow things down a little. You can say, "Would you mind speaking a little more slowly?" Or, "Could you write that down for me?" These are not signs of weak English. They are signs of smart communication. Another everyday situation is returning something or making a complaint in a polite way. This can feel uncomfortable, but English has very natural phrases that make it easier. You might say, "Hi, I bought this yesterday, but unfortunately, it doesn't seem to work properly." Or, "I'm sorry, but I think there's been a problem with my order." Or, "I was hoping to exchange this if possible." These phrases are firm, but still polite. They help you express your need without sounding overly emotional. Now imagine a simple return conversation. "Hi, I bought this last week, but it doesn't fit quite right." "No problem. Do you have the receipt with you?" "Yes, I do. I was wondering if I could exchange it for a different size." That is a beautiful everyday exchange. Clear, respectful, and very realistic. What I want you to notice in all of these practical situations is that natural English is often built from calm, useful patterns, asking clearly, checking gently, confirming information, explaining small problems, and responding politely. When you practice these patterns enough, they begin to feel familiar. And then English stops feeling like a test. It starts feeling like a tool, something you can reach for when real life happens. And that is such an important shift, because your goal is not only to know English in theory. Your goal is to be able to use it while buying something, asking where to go, checking an appointment, solving a delay, or asking someone to explain again. These are the moments where confidence is built, not through perfection, but through repeated calm use. Let's begin with a very common daily question. How was your day? This question may sound easy, but it is actually a great chance to practice fuller natural English. A very short answer would be, "It was good." And of course, that is not wrong, but it does not give much energy to the conversation. A more natural answer could be, "It was pretty good, actually. I had a lot to do, but I managed to stay organized." Or, "It started off a bit slowly, but it got better as the day went on." Or, "It was fine overall. Just a little tiring by the end." These answers sound more natural because they include shape. They tell a small story. They move through the day in a simple way, and that makes them feel more human. That little idea is very important. Natural conversation often has movement in it. We do not just say one flat thing. We say how something started, how it changed, what affected it, or how we felt by the end. For example, my morning was a bit chaotic, but the afternoon was much calmer. Or I was stressed at first, but once I got started, it all felt more manageable. Or nothing special happened, but I had a nice quiet evening, which I really needed. These are excellent everyday patterns because they help you sound thoughtful without sounding complicated. Now imagine someone asks, "How's your week been?" You might say, "It's been busy, but in a good way. I've been getting a lot done." That is a lovely natural answer. Or you could say, "Honestly, it's felt a bit long. I think I've just been more tired than usual." Or, "It's been mixed, really. Some days felt productive and others felt a little messy." That word, mixed, is especially useful in everyday English because so many real experiences are mixed, not completely good, not completely bad, just a combination of different feelings. And being able to express that kind of balance makes your English feel much more mature. Another great way to keep a conversation going is by talking about experiences from the recent past. Things that happened earlier today, yesterday, and over the weekend, or sometime recently. In everyday life, people often ask questions like, "Did you do anything nice over the weekend? Have you been anywhere interesting lately? What did you get up to yesterday?" Or, "Did anything funny happen today?" These questions are perfect for building conversational English because they invite a little story, not a long speech, just a small, natural piece of your life. For example, if someone asks, "Did you do anything nice over the weekend?" You could say, "Yeah, actually. I met up with an old friend for coffee, and it was really nice to catch up." Or, "Nothing big, but I had a really relaxing Sunday, and I think I needed that more than I realized." Or, "I mostly stayed home. Oh, but I finally got around to doing a few things I'd been putting off." That phrase, "got around to," is very useful. It means you finally found the time or energy to do something, and it appears a lot in natural English. Now let's listen to how a longer answer can feel smooth and easy. Imagine someone asks, "How was your weekend?" You answer, "It was actually pretty nice. I didn't do anything especially exciting, but I had some time to rest. I also went out for a while on Saturday, which was a good change of pace." That answer is not difficult, but it sounds real. It has balance. It has detail. And it gives the other person several possible ways to continue the conversation. They could ask where you went, why you needed rest, what kind of change of pace you mean, or whether you usually spend weekends like that. This is something I want you to notice very carefully. A stronger answer creates more paths for the conversation. That is one of the secrets of sounding fluent. You do not need to say a lot, but what you say should give the conversation somewhere to go. If you say, "My weekend was good," there is not much to work with. But if you say, "My weekend was pretty good," I mostly rested, but I also met a friend I hadn't seen in ages. Now the conversation has life in it. The other person can respond naturally. Oh, really? How was that? Or, that sounds nice. How long had it been? And just like that, the exchange feels real. Let's move into memories now, because talking about past experiences is such a common part of everyday conversation. People often say things like, "That reminds me of," "I remember once," "This happened to me the other day," or "I used to do that all the time." These are wonderful conversation openers because they help you link what is being said now to something you experienced before, and that creates connection. For example, if someone says, "I had to wake up really early today," you might respond, "That reminds me of last week. I had one of those mornings where everything felt too early." That is such a natural response. Or if someone says, "I've been trying to spend less time on my phone," ouch, you could say, "I actually went through a phase like that a few months ago, and it made a bigger difference than I expected." These kinds of sentences are very useful because they allow you to join the conversation in a personal way without suddenly making it all about you. You are connecting your experience to the topic, and that is exactly what natural conversation often does. The phrase "I used to" is also very powerful for B1 to B2 conversation, because people often compare the past with the present. You can say, "I used to stay up late all the time, but now I really need my sleep." Or, "I used to enjoy busy places more, but these days I prefer somewhere quiet." Or, "I used to leave everything until the last minute, but I'm trying to be more organized now." These comparisons make your speech feel more reflective and more personal, and they are very common in relaxed, everyday conversation. Now imagine someone asks, "Are you good at managing your time?" A natural answer might be, "I'm better than I used to be. I still get overwhelmed sometimes, but I've improved a lot." That sounds balanced and real. Or if someone asks, "Do you like mornings?" you could say, "Not naturally, but I've learned to appreciate them more than I used to." That sounds much more natural than a simple yes or no. And again, it gives the conversation room to continue. Let's turn now to future hopes and plans. Because daily conversation is not only about the past and the present. People also talk all the time about what they want to do, what they are hoping for, what they have been thinking about, and what they might change in the future. This kind of English often sounds softer than fixed future grammar, because real-life plans are often uncertain. We say things like, "I've been meaning to," "I'm hoping to," "I'd like to," "At some point I want to," or "I've been thinking about." These are very natural everyday patterns. For example, if someone asks, "Any plans for the next few weeks?" you could say, "Nothing huge, but I'm hoping to get a few things sorted out." Or, "I'd like to take a short break if I can find the time." Or, "I've been thinking about changing my routine a little." just to make things feel more balanced. These answers sound realistic because adult life is often full of half plans, small goals, and things we intend to do but have not fully done yet. And English reflects that reality. Let's imagine a more personal question. Is there anything you've been wanting to do lately? You might answer, yeah, actually. I've been meaning to spend more time outdoors. I think I've been indoors too much recently. That sounds very natural. Or you could say, I'd really like to get back into reading more regularly. I used to read a lot and I miss that. That is a beautiful everyday answer. It connects present desire, past habit, and current feeling, all in a simple, natural way. Now let's talk about how to keep a back and forth conversation smooth, because conversation is not only about your answers. It is also about how you respond while the other person is speaking and how you move naturally between listening and speaking. In everyday English, one very useful skill is echoing part of what the other person said, not in a robotic way, but in a warm, involved way. For example, if someone says, I've been feeling a little distracted lately, you can respond, a little distracted, or, yeah, I know that feeling, or, what do you think is causing that? These reactions show that you are paying attention, and they encourage the other person to continue. Imagine this conversation. One person says, I've had a hard time focusing this week. The other replies, really? Has it just been one of those weeks? Then the first person says, yeah, exactly. I don't think I've fully switched off in days. And the second person responds, that can be so draining. Sometimes your mind just never gets a chance to rest. This conversation sounds natural because each speaker is reacting to the other, not simply waiting for their turn. That is such an important part of fluent conversation, the feeling of real exchange. A helpful trick here is using phrases that gently invite more detail. Expressions like, how come? What happened? How did that go? What was that like? And then what? And or, how are you feeling about that now? Are all wonderful ways to keep conversation moving. If someone says, I ran into an old friend yesterday, you can say, no way. What was that like? If someone says, I'm thinking of changing jobs, you might ask, really? What's making you think about that? These are simple questions, but they sound very natural, and they help conversations feel deeper and more personal. Now let's spend some time on describing routines in a more interesting way, because many learners can describe routine in a very basic form. But at B1 to B2 level, it is useful to make those descriptions more flexible and more real. Instead of saying only, I wake up, I eat breakfast, I go to work, you can say, most mornings I try to get up early enough to have a quiet start before the day gets busy. Or, my routine changes a bit depending on the day, but I usually like to begin slowly if I can. Or, I'm not someone who jumps straight into the day. I need a little time to wake up properly. These versions sound much more natural because they reflect personality. And personality is a huge part of conversation. Here is another example. Someone asks, "What's your usual evening like?" You could answer, "It depends on how tired I am, but I usually try to keep my evenings fairly quiet." Or, "Most evenings I'm just happy to slow down a bit. Maybe eat something simple and have a little space to breathe." Or, "I don't always have the same routine. But I like ending the day in a calm way if possible." These are such useful sentences because they help you sound like a real adult describing real life, not like a learner repeating a classroom pattern. Now let's practice a longer conversational exchange that brings all of this together. Imagine a friend asks, "How have you been lately?" You answer, "Pretty good overall. I think I've just been trying to find a better balance with everything." Your friend says, "Yeah? What do you mean?" And you reply, "Nothing dramatic. I've just had a lot on my mind recently, and I realized I needed to slow down a little." Then your friend says, "That makes sense. Have you been able to?" And you answer, "A bit. Not perfectly. Yeah, but better than before." This is such a natural conversation. It is not full of difficult grammar, but it feels thoughtful, calm, and very real. Let's imagine another one. Someone asks, "Have you done anything interesting lately?" You say, "Not especially interesting, to be honest. But I did reconnect with someone I hadn't spoken to in a long time, and that was really nice." The other person says, "Oh, really? How did that happen?" You reply, "Completely by chance. We just started talking again, and it felt surprisingly easy." That exchange sounds fluid because each answer opens the next question naturally. And that is exactly what good conversation does. Imagine someone asks you, "Why did you enjoy that trip so much?" And you are not ready with an immediate answer. You could say, "Let me think. I think it was the atmosphere more than anything." That sounds completely natural. Or maybe someone asks, "What do you like about working from home?" You might say, "It's hard to explain exactly, but I think I just like having a bit more control over my day." That is beautiful, natural conversation. It is thoughtful. It is realistic. And it does not sound like you are reciting a memorized answer. Now let's talk about paraphrasing, because this is one of the strongest conversation skills you can build at B1 to B2 level. Paraphrasing means explaining your idea in another way when the perfect word does not come to you. This happens all the time in real life. Even native speakers do it. For example, if you forget the word receipt, you might say, "the little paper they give you when you buy something." If you cannot remember remote control, you might say, "the thing you use to change the channel." If you forget appointment, you could say, "the time I booked to see someone." These explanations may be longer, but they keep the conversation moving. And that is what matters. Let's imagine a conversation where this happens naturally. Someone asks, Why were you late? And you say, because I had to stop at the place where you go to pick up medicine. I forgot the word. The pharmacy. That is real speech. It is not perfect from beginning to end, but it works. Or someone asks, what were you trying to buy? And you answer, I needed one of those things you plug into the... Being able to explain around missing vocabulary is often more useful than knowing one difficult word, because it helps you survive real conversation. Another very important skill in spontaneous English is learning how to soften your speech while you think. Sometimes learners feel pressure to answer too fast, and because of that, their sentences become short, tense, or unnatural. But everyday English often includes soft openings like I think, honestly, to be fair, from what I've seen. As far as I know, at least for me, or it depends really. These openings help you begin naturally, and they make your English sound more flexible. For example, if someone asks, do you think people talk too much on social media? You do not need to jump into a hard answer immediately. You can say, it depends really. I think some conversations can be helpful, but a lot of it can feel a bit overwhelming. That sounds thoughtful and calm. Or if someone asks, was it difficult to adjust? You might answer, at first, yes. But after a while, it started to feel much more natural. These kinds of soft openings and balanced answers are extremely useful in everyday conversation. While because real life is full of opinions and experiences that are not fully simple. Now let's practice how to respond when someone surprises you with an unexpected question. This happens often in real conversations. Someone suddenly asks, what would you do if you had a month off? Or, have you ever thought about moving somewhere else? Or, what's something you've changed your mind about recently? These questions can feel difficult because they are not routine, but you can still handle them smoothly if you know how to begin. For instance, if someone asks, have you ever thought about living somewhere else? You could say, yeah, actually, I have thought about it from time to time. Not in a serious way yet, but it does cross my mind. That is a very natural answer. Or if someone asks, what would you do if you had more free time? You might say, honestly, I think I'd try to slow down a bit and probably spend more time doing things I usually put off. Again, this answer is not complicated, but it sounds calm, fluent, and real. A very useful expression here is from time to time, because people use it constantly to mean sometimes. Another useful expression is, it does cross my mind, which means you do think about it occasionally. These are the kinds of phrases that make your English sound more natural and less mechanical. They help you speak in a way that feels lived in, as if the language belongs to your everyday life. Now let's talk about conversation repair, which simply means fixing the conversation smoothly when something goes wrong. Maybe you misunderstood. Maybe the other person misunderstood you. Maybe your sentence came out badly, Or maybe you want to correct what you just said. In all of these moments, natural English has many gentle ways to repair things. You can say, "Sorry, that's not quite what I meant. Let me say that differently. Actually, what I was trying to say is, no, not that. I mean," or "I explained that badly. What I mean is," these phrases are incredibly helpful because they let you stay relaxed even when your first sentence is not perfect. Imagine you say, "I don't like being alone." But what you really meant was that you sometimes need quiet time. You can repair it naturally by saying, "That's not exactly what I mean. I just mean I need a balance between being around people and having time to myself." That is such a useful conversational move. It shows that meaning matters more than perfect first attempts. And that is very true in real spoken English. Another common repair moment is when you understand part of something, but not all of it. Maybe someone says something too quickly or uses a phrase you do not fully know. Instead of freezing, you can say, "I got most of that, but I missed the last part." Or, "Sorry, I'm with you so far. But what did you mean by that last bit?" Or, "I think I understand." Or, "But could you explain that a little more?" These are excellent phrases because they are specific, polite, and confident. They do not sound helpless. They sound like someone actively managing the conversation. Let's imagine a small exchange. One person says, "I think the problem is that everything's been pushed back because of the delay." And you reply, "I follow the general idea. But when you say pushed back, do you mean postponed?" That is such a strong communication move. You are checking meaning clearly. You are not pretending to understand. And you are helping the conversation become more accurate. That is real conversational intelligence. Now let's work on sounding smoother in everyday back and forth speaking. Because sometimes the challenge is not vocabulary, it is rhythm. In natural English, people often connect ideas with phrases like "at the same time." On the other hand, "in a way," "at least," "to be honest," when it comes to "the thing is," and "at the end of the day." These linking phrases make your speech sound more connected and more comfortable. They help your ideas flow from one sentence to the next. For example, if someone asks, "Do you enjoy working in a team?" you could say, "In a way, yes. I like sharing ideas with people. But at the same time, I also need some space to concentrate on my own." That sounds very natural, balanced, and fluent. Or if someone asks, "Do you like living in a busy area?" you could answer, "The thing is, it has its advantages. Everything's nearby, but it can feel a little overwhelming sometimes." These are not especially difficult sentences, but they sound much more natural than very short answers because they show balance and flow. Let's move into some longer, spontaneous, everyday exchanges. Imagine someone asks, "Have you changed much over the last few years?" You might answer, "Yeah, I think so. Maybe not in dramatic ways, but I do think I've become a little calmer about things. I used to overthink everything much more than I do now. That is such a natural answer. It includes reflection, contrast, and personality. Another example. Then someone asks, "What kind of environment do you work best in?" You could say, "Probably somewhere fairly quiet. I can handle a bit of noise. But if there's too much going on around me, I find it harder to focus." That answer sounds smooth because it builds gently, one idea leading into the next. Now imagine a more casual, everyday exchange. A friend says, "You seem more relaxed these days," and you answer, "Maybe a little. I think I've just been trying not to put too much pressure on myself all the time." Then the friend says, "That's probably a good thing." And you respond, "Yeah, I think so too." It doesn't solve everything, but it definitely helps. This is the kind of everyday English that feels deeply natural. It's not because the words are advanced, but because the tone is human, warm, and believable. Another excellent fluency skill is responding to the feeling behind someone's words, not only the words themselves. If someone says, "I've just had so much going on lately," you do not need to answer with a fact. You can answer the feeling. "That sounds like a lot." Or, "Yeah, that can really wear you down." Or, "I'm not surprised you're tired." These responses are powerful because good conversation is emotional as well as practical. When you hear the feeling and respond to the feeling, your English becomes much more natural. Let's imagine that in a conversation. One person says, "I haven't really had a chance to stop all week." And the other replies, "That sounds exhausting. Have you at least had a little time to rest?" The first person says, "Not much, honestly." And the other responds, "Yeah, that kind of pace catches up with you after a while." That is beautiful everyday English. Very simple, very human, and very connected. Now I want to give you a soft speaking exercise in paragraph form. Imagine someone asks you, "What's something you've been trying to improve in your life lately?" A natural answer could sound like this: "I think I've been trying to be a little more organized. Not in a perfect way, but just enough to make daily life feel less rushed. I've noticed that when I plan things a bit better, I feel calmer overall." And that answer is excellent because it does not try too hard. It sounds reflective and real. Here is another one. Imagine someone asks, "Do you enjoy meeting new people?" You could say, "I do, although it depends on the situation. If the atmosphere feels relaxed, I usually enjoy it. But if it feels too formal or rushed, I can be a bit quiet at first." That answer sounds natural because it is honest, balanced, and specific. It has a real voice inside it. And that is exactly what you want in spoken English. And here is one more. Imagine someone asks, "What do you usually do when you need to clear your head?" A strong, natural answer could be, "Usually, I try to step away from everything for a little while." Or even if it's just for a short walk or a quiet break. I've learned that I don't always need a big solution. Sometimes I just need a little space to breathe. That sounds very human, very calm, and very natural. This is the real goal of fluency at this level. Not sounding like a machine that always answers instantly, but sounding like a real person who can stay inside the conversation, think while speaking, repair small mistakes, explain around missing words, respond to feelings, and keep talking in a calm, connected way. When you can do that, your English becomes much more powerful because it becomes usable in real life, in normal moments, with real people. Now imagine someone asks, "Did you see your family this weekend?" You might say, "Yeah, I did. I saw them for a few hours on Sunday, which was nice." Or, "Not this weekend, actually, but we spoke on the phone for a while." Or, "I did, and it was really good to catch up because it had been a little while." That phrase, "it was good to catch up," is very useful in conversations about people you care about, because so much everyday social English is about keeping in touch, reconnecting, and sharing updates. Talking about friends is also a big part of everyday conversation. People often ask, "Have you seen Maya recently? How's your friend doing? Are you still in touch with Alex?" Or, "Do you get to see your friends often?" These questions are common because relationships are a big part of daily life. If someone asks, "Are you still in touch with your old school friends?" you might answer, "With some of them, yeah. Not all of them, but there are a few I still speak to quite regularly." That sounds very natural. Or you could say, "Not as much as I used to be, honestly. Life just got busy and people ended up going in different directions." That is such a real and mature kind of sentence. It reflects the way adults often talk about relationships in everyday life. Now let's think about shared daily routines with other people. This comes up all the time if you live with someone, work closely with someone, or simply spend a lot of time around certain people. Someone might ask, "Do you usually eat dinner together? Who does the cooking in your house? Do you and your roommate get along well? Or, how do you divide things up at home?" These are everyday questions, and they are excellent for natural conversation because the answers are usually simple but full of real-life detail. For example, if someone asks, "Who does the cooking in your house?" you could say, "It depends, really. We both do a bit, depending on who has more time." That is a beautiful natural answer. Very realistic, very balanced. Or you might say, "I probably do it a little more often, but not always." Sometimes we just keep things simple. That also sounds natural because it does not try too hard. It reflects the ordinary, flexible truth of daily life. Here is another example. Someone asks, "Do you enjoy living with other people?" You might answer, "Mostly, yes. I think it can be nice to have someone around as long as everyone respects each other's space." That is an excellent B1 to B2 answer. It includes a condition, "as long as," and that helps your English sound more thoughtful. Or you could say, "I do, but I also think it depends a lot on the situation and the people involved. That phrase, the people involved, is very natural in spoken English when talking about group situations, shared arrangements, or relationships. Now let's move into something very common in daily conversation. Now, talking about misunderstandings or small tensions with other people. Not big dramatic arguments all the time, but the small moments that happen in normal life. Someone forgets to reply. Someone arrives late. Someone misunderstands your tone. Someone feels stressed. Or two people are tired and communicate badly. These things happen all the time. And being able to talk about them naturally in English is very valuable. For example, someone might say, "Did everything work out in the end?" And you could answer, "Yeah, it did. There was a bit of confusion at first, but we cleared it up." That phrase, "we cleared it up," is extremely useful. It means you solved a misunderstanding or made things clear. You could also say, "It was a little awkward for a moment, but it's all fine now." Or, "We were just not really on the same page at first." That last phrase, "not on the same page," is very common in everyday English. It means two people were not understanding the situation in the same way. Imagine a natural conversation. One person asks, "You seemed a bit annoyed earlier. Was everything okay?" The other replies, "Yeah, everything's fine. I think there was just a small misunderstanding, and I was a bit stressed at the time." That answer sounds very mature and balanced. It does not blame anyone too strongly. It explains the feeling and the situation. And that is often how natural adults speak in daily life. Not every disagreement needs strong language. Often, softer English sounds much more real. Now let's talk about asking for advice, because this happens so naturally in everyday conversations. People ask things like, "What would you do?" "Do you think I should say something?" "How would you handle that?" "Do you think I'm overthinking it?" Or, "Would you just leave it for now?" These are such useful conversation patterns because they lead to longer, more personal exchanges, and they help you practice more flexible English. If someone asks you, "What would you do in my situation?" you could begin gently with something like, "Honestly, I think I'd probably talk to them directly, but in a calm way." That sounds natural. Jiao. Or you might say, "It depends a little on the situation, but I'd probably give it a day or two before deciding anything." That is a great answer because it sounds thoughtful, not too certain, and very human. Let's imagine a fuller advice conversation. One person says, "I'm not sure whether I should bring it up or just leave it alone." The other replies, "To be honest, I think it depends on how important it is to you. If it's really bothering you, it might be better to say something calmly rather than let it build up." That is a very natural advice response. It is gentle, balanced, and supportive. Another option might be, "If it were me, I'd probably wait until things felt a little less tense." That phrase, if it were me, is excellent for giving personal advice in a soft way. Giving advice in English often sounds best when it is softened, rather than too direct. Instead of saying, do this, people often say, you might want to. Maybe it would help if. It could be a good idea to. Or you could always try. These phrases are so useful because they sound kind and respectful. If a friend says, I've been feeling really disorganized lately, you could say, maybe it would help if you kept things simple for a few days and focused on one thing at a time. Or you might want to write a few things down and see if that makes the week feel more manageable. These are natural, supportive replies. Oh, and they sound much more comfortable than hard instructions. Now let's move into asking for opinions, because this is another huge part of everyday conversation. People ask each other what they think all the time about plans, people, ideas, work decisions, routines, movies, places, habits, and life in general. Common questions include, what do you think? Do you think it's worth it? How does that sound to you? Would you go for it? Or does that seem reasonable to you? These are all wonderful conversation openers because they invite reflection, not just yes or no answers. If someone asks, do you think I'm making too much of this? You could answer, no, not necessarily. I think it makes sense that it's on your mind. That is such a natural, emotionally supportive answer. Or you could say, maybe a little. But that doesn't mean your feelings aren't real. That sounds thoughtful, gentle, and very human. Another useful response is, I can see both sides, to be honest, because many real-life situations are not simple, and this phrase helps you express balance naturally. Let's imagine a daily life conversation between two friends. One says, I'm thinking of changing my routine a bit. I feel like my days have become too repetitive. The other replies, yeah, I can understand that. Sometimes even a small change can make things feel fresher. The first person says, that's what I was thinking. I just don't know where to start. And the second answers, maybe start with one part of the day. Something small enough that it doesn't feel overwhelming. This conversation feels natural because it includes empathy, opinion, and advice, all in a soft, everyday style. Now let's talk about longer conversations where connection matters just as much as vocabulary. This is such an important idea. Sometimes learners focus so much on words that they forget conversation is also about tone, timing, kindness, curiosity, and emotional attention. In real life, people remember how you made them feel just as much as what exact words you used. So when someone is sharing something personal, even something small, your response should not only be grammatically correct, it should also feel appropriate and caring. For example, if someone says, I've just been feeling a bit off lately, a strong natural response might be, I'm sorry to hear that. Do you know what's been making you feel that way? Or, yeah, That sounds difficult. I hope things get a little lighter for you soon. Or even simply, that can happen sometimes. Have you had much chance to rest? These responses are useful not because they are advanced, but because they respond to the human reality of the conversation. Now imagine someone shares something positive. I finally feel like things are settling down a bit. A natural response could be, "That's good to hear. You needed that." Or, "I'm really glad things are feeling more manageable for you." Or, "That must be a relief after everything you've had going on." These kinds of reactions help the other person feel heard. And that makes your English sound much more natural and connected. Let's practice a slightly longer relationship-based conversation. Imagine one person says, "I haven't really had much time for friends lately, and I feel a little bad about that." The other responds, "Yeah, I get that. Sometimes life just pulls you in too many directions at once." Then the first person says, "Exactly. And by the time I have free time, I'm usually too tired to do much." The second replies, "That makes sense. Maybe the pressure to do a lot is part of what makes it harder." That is such a natural conversation. It is reflective, emotionally aware, and still based on simple, everyday English. Here is another one. Someone says, "I think I've been a bit distant lately without meaning to be." The other person replies, "That happens sometimes. It doesn't always mean anything bad. Maybe you've just had a lot on your mind." Then the first person says, "Yeah, I think that's part of it." And the second answers, "It might help just to check in when you have the energy. Even a small message can make a difference." This is exactly the kind of everyday English that feels thoughtful and human. And it is very useful at B1 to B2 level because it helps you speak about real life in a calm and natural tone. Now I want to spend a moment on sounding warm without sounding overly dramatic, because that is a skill many learners need. In natural English, especially in everyday conversation, warmth often comes through small phrases, not huge speeches. Things like, "That's lovely. I'm glad to hear that. That sounds tough. That must have been hard. I hope it goes well. That's really kind of you." Or, "I'm sure you'll figure it out." These phrases are simple, but they carry a lot of emotional value, and they make you sound much more comfortable in real conversations. Here is a soft speaking exercise for this idea. Imagine a friend says, "I'm meeting someone important tomorrow, and I'm a little nervous." A natural answer could be, "That's completely understandable. I'm sure once the conversation starts, you'll feel a bit more comfortable." Or imagine someone says, "I finally had a quiet evening to myself." You could answer, "That sounds really nice. Sometimes you need that more than you realize." These are strong, natural, human responses, and learning them will help your English feel much more emotionally fluent. Imagine someone says, "It's been such a busy week," and you reply, "Yeah, I know what you mean. Actually, I didn't realize how tired I was until yesterday evening." That word "actually" helps you move gently into your own experience. Or maybe someone says, I finally cleaned the whole apartment. And you respond, that reminds me. Boy, I still need to sort out a few things at home this weekend. That phrase, that reminds me, creates a very natural connection. Another common example would be, by the way, did you ever hear back from them? That is such a normal part of real English. And learning these tiny bridges can make a very big difference in the feeling of your speech. Now, let's think about how conversations change direction naturally, because this happens constantly. Maybe you begin by talking about work, then suddenly move into weekend plans, then into family, and then into food or travel or something funny that happened earlier. This is completely normal. And one of the best ways to handle it is by staying flexible, rather than trying to control everything too much. Yeah, if someone says, I've been so tired lately, you might respond, yeah, same here. I think this time of year always feels a bit full somehow. Then they might say, exactly. I haven't even had time to plan the weekend properly. And now the topic has shifted. You can continue naturally by saying, do you usually make plans in advance, or do you prefer deciding later? That is a great example of natural flow. One idea leads softly into another, without effort. This kind of flexible conversation becomes even easier when you stop feeling that every answer must be perfect. In fact, many real conversations are built from half-complete ideas, reactions, clarifications, and little adjustments. Someone says something. You react. One, you add a small thought. They respond. And slowly the conversation grows. This means you do not need to speak in long formal paragraphs all the time. You simply need to stay present. If someone says, I didn't sleep well at all, you do not need to produce a complex answer. You can say, oh no, one of those nights. Then they might say, exactly. I just couldn't switch my mind off. And you can respond, that's the worst. It makes the whole next day feel heavier somehow. This is natural, warm, and very fluent in feeling, even though the language itself is not overly difficult. Another important part of natural conversation is knowing how to expand when the moment feels right, and keep it light when the moment feels light. In other words, good conversation has rhythm. Sometimes a short answer is enough. Sometimes the other person wants more. And part of becoming a stronger speaker is learning to feel that difference. If someone casually asks, how's your day going? You might answer briefly with, pretty well so far. Just trying to get a few things done. That may be enough in a passing moment. But if you are sitting with a friend and they ask the same question in a more open way, you might naturally say, it's been okay, actually. A little busy, but not in a bad way. I feel better now that I've finally started catching up on things. Same question, different rhythm, different depth. And that is exactly how real English works. Let's bring this to life with a longer everyday conversation that feels realistic. Imagine two friends meeting for coffee after not seeing each other for a little while. One says, "Hey, it's so good to see you." The other replies, "You too. It feels like it's been ages." Then the first person says, "I know. Life's just been moving so quickly lately." And the other answers, "Seriously, I feel like I've barely had time to think." The first person laughs a little and says, "Same esta. I kept meaning to message you properly, but every day just disappeared." And the other responds, "Don't worry. I completely get it. I've been the same." Then the first asks, "So, how have you really been?" And the other says, "Honestly, a bit all over the place at times, but overall, okay. I think I'm just trying to find a better rhythm again." That is such natural English, emotional, realistic, warm, and still simple enough to use. Now let's continue that same exchange. The first friend says, "Yeah, that makes sense. I think a lot of people are feeling like that lately." And the other replies, "I think so too. It's strange because nothing is exactly wrong, but everything still feels a bit full somehow." Then the first says, "That's exactly it. Not terrible, just full." And the second laughs and says, "Yes, that's the word." Then the first asks, "Have you been doing anything to make things feel a bit easier?" And the second answers, "A little. I've been trying not to overfill my weekends. Even just having one slower day helps more than I expect." This kind of conversation is beautiful for fluency practice because it shows agreement, emotional understanding, follow-up questions, and fuller answers that still feel very natural. Notice something important here. The speakers are not only exchanging information, they are building shared understanding. That is a huge part of everyday English. Phrases like, "That's exactly it," "I know what you mean," "That makes sense," "I've been the same," or even just "that helps," all create closeness in conversation. They make English sound less like performance and more like connection. If you can learn to use these small linking responses naturally, your conversations will immediately feel stronger. Now let's move into another realistic daily life exchange. This time in a more practical setting that slowly becomes personal. Imagine two coworkers finishing the day. One says, "Are you heading home now?" The other replies, "Yeah, I think so. I've had enough for one day." The first person laughs and says, "I don't blame you. It's been nonstop." Then the second answers, "It really has. I thought I'd get more done, but half the day went into things I wasn't even expecting." The first says, "That always happens. You plan one kind of day. Whoa, and then something completely different takes over." And the second replies, "Exactly. Although to be fair, I do feel better now that the main thing is done." That sounds very natural. And now the conversation can move anywhere. Maybe dinner plans, maybe the weekend, maybe family, maybe just a shared complaint about the week. That is real conversation flow. Here is another natural shift. The first coworker says, "By the way, Are you doing anything this weekend? And the second answers, nothing too exciting, honestly. I think I just need a bit of recovery time. Then the first says, that sounds like a good plan. I keep telling myself I'll have a quiet weekend, and then somehow I fill it with things. The second laughs and says, I do that too. I think sometimes I forget that rest also counts as doing something useful. This is exactly the kind of sentence that makes spoken English feel mature and natural. Rest also counts as doing something useful. It sounds reflective, simple, and very real. Then the first person might respond, it really does. I've started realizing that more lately, and the conversation continues easily. Let's now practice a situation where someone asks a more personal question and you respond in a calm, natural way. Imagine someone says, have you been happy with how things are going lately? That is not a simple question, but it can still be answered naturally. You might say, for the most part, yes. I think there are still things I want to improve, but I'm trying to notice the progress as well. That is a beautiful everyday answer. Honest, balanced, and thoughtful. Or you could say, I'd say mostly yes, although I've definitely had moments where I felt a bit overwhelmed. Again, this sounds very human because it contains both truth and balance. Not an extreme answer, just a real one. Now imagine someone asks, what's been on your mind lately? You could answer, a few things really. Mostly just how to make daily life feel a little calmer and more manageable. That sounds natural. Or, honestly, I think I've just been thinking about balance. Java, how to do what I need to do without feeling drained all the time. These responses are extremely useful because they sound like real adult English. The kind of language people use when talking about normal life. Not textbook life, but actual life. Another powerful area of everyday conversation is knowing how to reflect on something after it happens. People say things like, looking back, I think. At the time, I didn't realize. Now that I think about it. Or in hindsight. These expressions help you speak in a more thoughtful way. And they are very common in natural conversation. For example, at the time, I thought it was just a stressful week. But looking back, I think I was just more tired than I realized. How that sounds very smooth and reflective. Or, now that I think about it, I probably should have said something earlier. That is a useful everyday sentence for talking about communication, decisions, and small regrets. Let's place that into a conversation. One person says, did the situation bother you more than you expected? The other replies, at the time, I tried not to think too much about it. But looking back, I think it affected me more than I admitted. That is such a natural way to express reflection. Then the first person might say, yeah, sometimes it takes a while to understand how something really felt. And the second responds, exactly. You don't always notice it straight away. This is rich everyday English. Deeply human. But still simple enough to use with practice. Now I want to give you a fuller speaking style exercise in paragraph form. Imagine someone asks you, "What kind of conversations do you enjoy most?" A natural answer could sound like this: I think I enjoy the kinds of conversations that feel easy and honest, not necessarily dramatic or deep all the time, just the kind where both people can speak naturally and feel comfortable. I like it when there's room to laugh a little, reflect a little, and not feel rushed. That is a wonderful B1 to B2 style answer because it is clear, personal, and expressive without being difficult. Here is another one. Imagine someone asks, "What helps you feel comfortable around someone?" You could say, "Probably when the other person feels genuine and when I don't feel pressure to respond perfectly." I think the easiest conversations are usually the ones where both people can just be themselves a bit more. That sounds very natural. And it also reflects a deeper truth about language. Comfort matters. And here is one more. Imagine someone asks, "What have you learned about communication recently?" A strong natural answer might be, "I think I've learned that a lot of misunderstandings come from small things: timing, tone, tiredness, assumptions, and not always from big problems. I also think being calm and clear matters more than saying everything perfectly." That answer is especially powerful. Ira, because it sounds fluent not only in language, but also in thought. That brings us to something I really want you to carry with you after this lesson. Everyday English conversation is not about memorizing 100 perfect replies. It is about becoming comfortable with common human situations, being greeted, being asked how you are, explaining your day, reacting naturally, asking simple follow-up questions, expressing opinion, handling small confusion, giving support, making plans, and staying flexible when the conversation shifts. The more you practice these patterns, the more they start to feel like part of you. And once that happens, speaking becomes less about searching for English and more about simply using it. Thank you so much, my dear English learners, for spending this time with me today. It truly means a lot to me that you stayed here, listened carefully, and practiced your English with me in this calm and gentle way. I hope this lesson helped you feel a little more confident, a little more relaxed, and a little more natural when thinking about everyday English conversations at B1 to B2 level. Please remember, you do not need to speak perfectly to speak well. You only need to keep going, keep listening, keep noticing how real English sounds, and keep practicing a little every day. That is how real progress happens. Slowly, naturally, and beautifully. If you enjoyed this lesson and would like to keep learning English with me, please subscribe and press the bell icon so you do not miss our next lesson. We learn together here every single day, step by step, in a simple, peaceful, and encouraging way. And if you want, you can come back to this lesson again later. Listen one more time. Repeat the useful phrases and practice the conversation patterns until they begin to feel easier and more natural in your own speaking. That kind of quiet repetition can help so much more than you think. I'm really proud of you for being here, for giving your time to your English, and for continuing this journey with patience and heart. Keep believing in your progress, even when it feels slow. Because every sentence you listen to, every phrase you repeat, and every small effort you make is helping you grow stronger, more fluent, and more confident. So take a deep breath, smile gently, and carry this good feeling with you into your day. I'll be here again very soon. And until then, take care of yourself. Keep practicing and keep moving forward in English, slowly, clearly, and together.